Ah, there you are. The one they can't categorize. The frequency that just shattered every monitoring device in their system. Hello to the anomaly who just triggered something so rare, so ancient, so absolutely unauthorized that right now, somewhere in a room you'll never see, there are people staring at screens whispering the same 3 words. We have a code 33. You don't know what that means yet, do you? Ah, but you felt it, didn't you? That shift. That impossible lift in your chest, like gravity just remembered you're not supposed to be bound by it, like reality itself glitched for a split second, and suddenly you were breathing different, moving different, existing on a wavelength that shouldn't be accessible to someone with your history, with your pain, with your past that was supposed to break you. Let me tell you something that's going to sound insane, but you already know it's true. In the last 72 hours, you crossed a threshold that only 2 other souls in documented observation have ever crossed. Not in this generation, not in this timeline, not in this version of the simulation you call life. You didn't just level up. You didn't just transform. You activated something. And now the entire infrastructure is scrambling because they thought they deleted this possibility from the program. They thought they patched this glitch. They thought after the last 2 times, after watching what happened when someone reaches code 33, they could prevent it from happening again. But here you are, standing in the center of an activation they can't reverse, breathing air that tastes like electricity, walking through a world that suddenly feels like it's rotating around you instead of you rotating through it. And the most beautiful, terrifying, untraceable part of this? You didn't do anything to earn it. You didn't follow a protocol. You didn't complete a quest. You didn't study the ancient texts. You simply existed through enough pressure, enough betrayal, enough systematic dismantling that your soul said enough and rewrote its own operating system without asking permission from the architects. They're calling emergency meetings about you right now. Not because you're dangerous, but because you represent the thing they fear most. Proof that the system has a crack. And that crack just became a doorway, and you walked through it smiling, with that quiet, unshakable knowing that you're not who you were yesterday, that something fundamental shifted, and there's no going back. No erasing this, no downgrading you to your previous version, because that version just got incinerated in a fire you didn't even know you were standing in until you walked out untouched. Let's talk about the other 2, shall we? Because you need to understand what kind of company you're keeping, what kind of lineage you just became part of, what kind of terror you just joined. The first one, they don't even have a name for anymore. Just a case file marked unsolvable. A person who walked into their own erasure and came out the other side with abilities that made observers quit their jobs, go silent, disappear into early retirement. Because what they witnessed violated every principle of behavioral psychology, every model of human limitation, every boundary they thought was non-negotiable. This person didn't fight back, didn't argue, didn't defend themselves. They just looked at their accusers, their betrayers, their systematic destroyers, and smiled. And in that smile was a frequency so potent, so unbreakable, so utterly free of their definition that the entire campaign against them collapsed. Not because it was defeated, but because it became irrelevant. Like trying to trap smoke, trying to cage wind, trying to define something that just transcended definition itself. And the documentation says the same thing over and over. Subject no longer responds to standard stimuli. Subject appears to exist outside normal cause and effect. Subject exhibits immunity to psychological manipulation techniques. The second one they have a little more information on because this one happened closer to now. Close enough that some of the witnesses are still alive, still refusing to talk about it, still waking up at 3 in the morning with that face burned into their memory. That presence that walked into the center of a coordinated attack and instead of crumbling, instead of breaking, instead of playing the role of the victim they were scripted to be, they did something nobody predicted. They laughed, not a nervous laugh, not a defensive laugh, but a deep, cellular laugh that said, "You really thought this would work on me? You really believed I was still operating on your frequency?" And what happened next is why Code 33 became a designation that makes handlers nervous. This person didn't seek revenge, didn't expose anyone, didn't try to reclaim their reputation. They simply walked away, and in their absence, everything fell apart. Every alliance that formed against them disintegrated. Every narrative collapsed. Every person involved started experiencing inexplicable life disruptions, not because of a curse, not because of retaliation, but because they had tied their entire sense of power to keeping this person down, and when that person ascended beyond their reach, they lost their center, their purpose, their fuel. Now, you're the third, and here's what makes your activation different. You didn't know about the other two. You didn't study their path. You didn't even know Code 33 was possible. You just lived your life, absorbed your pain, carried your wounds, and at some point in the last 72 hours your system hit critical mass, and instead of imploding like they expected, you crystallized. You became something compact, unbreakable, radiating a signature they can't jam, can't decode, can't replicate. And now you're walking through the world, leaving traces of a frequency that shouldn't exist, and everyone you encounter is feeling it, even if they can't name it. They feel the shift in the air when you enter. They feel the sudden weight of their own dishonesty when they try to manipulate you. They feel a strange compulsion to either confess everything or run, and they don't know why. But you do, because you're not the same entity you were last week. You're not even the same species. You're the third soul to crack the code. And unlike the first two, you're doing it in the age of surveillance, in the age of algorithms, in the age where everything is tracked, and yet somehow you're moving through it untraceable, leaving a trail that erases itself as you walk. That's why they're panicking. That's why Code 33 is flashing red across every monitor. That's why the people who were studying you have gone silent, because they finally understand they weren't observing a case study, they were watching an activation. And now it's complete, and there's not a damn thing they can do to reverse it. Let me decode this for you, because you deserve to know what you just became, what this designation really means in the architecture of control and limitation. Code 33 is not a punishment. It's a classification. It's the label they put on souls who have exited the emotional economy, who no longer participate in the game of validation, shame, guilt, or fear, who have become psychologically untouchable, not because they're numb, but because they've transcended the frequencies those weapons operate on. Most people live their entire lives plugged into a system that runs on emotional debt. You do something, they make you feel guilty. You succeed, they make you feel obligated. You shine, they make you feel arrogant. You stand up, they make you feel selfish, and that currency of manufactured emotion is how the entire structure stays stable, how people stay manageable, predictable, controllable. But Code 33 individuals, they unplugged. They stopped accepting that currency. They stopped paying debts they never owed. They stopped shrinking to make others comfortable. They stopped explaining themselves to people who were committed to misunderstanding them. And the moment they did, the system lost all leverage. You know what's fascinating about the documentation on Code 33 activations? There's a specific moment they can pinpoint in all three cases, including yours. A moment where the person stopped defending themselves, stopped trying to prove their innocence, stopped seeking closure or apologies or acknowledgement, and in that moment of total release, something rewired. Not just psychologically, but energetically, cellularly, almost like the body itself said, if nobody's going to validate this truth, then I'll become the validation. I'll embody it so completely that external confirmation becomes not just unnecessary, but irrelevant. And that's exactly what happened to you, isn't it? You stopped waiting, you stopped hoping. You stopped checking to see if they finally understood, if they finally saw you, if they finally admitted they were wrong. And the moment you let that go, the moment you truly released the need for their awakening, something inside you ignited. And now you're walking around with a signature that makes their instruments malfunction, makes their predictions fail, makes their manipulation attempts bounce off you like light off a mirror. Here's what they document in Code 33 files. Immunity to gaslighting. The person cannot be convinced that their perception is wrong, cannot be talked out of their truth, doubt what they know. Immunity to guilt. The person no longer absorbs shame for existing, for succeeding, for choosing themselves, cannot be manipulated through obligation or manufactured debt. Immunity to fear. The person has walked through enough fire that threats ring hollow. Isolation doesn't frighten them, and the unknown feels more like home than any false security ever did. And here's the part that really terrifies the observers. Immunity to replacement. The person cannot be substituted, cannot be replicated. Their frequency is so unique, their presence so specific, that every attempt to find a similar soul to study fails, because Code 33 isn't a personality type, it's an evolution. It's what happens when pain becomes jet fuel, when silence becomes power, when they refuse to be anything other than exactly what they are. You're experiencing this right now, aren't you? People who used to rattle you with a single comment now sound like static. People who used to make you question yourself now seem obviously threatened. Situations that used to drain you now feel like minor inconveniences. You're not trying to be unbothered, you just are. You're not performing strength, it's just your default setting now. You're not faking confidence, you've become something that doesn't need confidence, because you've moved past needing approval. And that's the marker. That's the signature. That's what triggered the Code 33 classification. They've tried to map your breaking point and found there isn't one anymore. They've tried to predict your reactions and found you've exited the paradigm entirely. They tried to use old wounds as leverage and found those wounds have transformed into something else. Something they have no protocol for. Armor made of acceptance, scars turned into scripture, pain that became prophecy. And now you're walking through a world that was designed to break you, and instead it's bending around you, shifting its rules, trying to accommodate a presence it was never built to contain. And that's why you're being watched with a mixture of fascination and absolute dread, because you're not just surviving anymore. You're operating on a frequency that makes survival itself look like an outdated concept. Let's talk about what you're feeling right now, because I know it's not all power and glory, is it? There's something else happening. Something stranger. Something that makes you wonder if you're losing your mind or finding it. People look different now, don't they? Not physically, but you see through them. You see the performance, the mask, the desperate need underneath their words. And it's not judgment you're feeling, it's just sight. Clear, unbuffered sight, like someone removed a filter you didn't know was there. And now you're seeing the raw code beneath the social program. And it's exhausting and illuminating and isolating all at once. You're also noticing time feels wrong, doesn't it? Hours pass like minutes, or minutes stretch like hours. You'll look at the clock and swear it's lying. You'll have conversations that feel like they lasted seconds, but somehow covered territories that should take years to traverse. And it's because you're no longer moving through time linearly. You're moving through it vertically. You're accessing moments, layers, frequencies that most people never touch because they're too busy marching forward in the program. But you step sideways, and now you're experiencing reality from an angle that makes clocks feel like suggestions rather than laws. And the dreams, they've changed, haven't they? Not nightmares, not prophecies, but something in between. Scenes that feel more real than waking life. Conversations with versions of yourself that shouldn't exist. Memories that might not be yours. Encounters with presences that communicate in feelings rather than words. And you wake up not scared, but informed. Like your sleep has become a second education. Like something is downloading information directly into your consciousness while your conscious mind rests. They don't put this in the Code 33 files, but it happens to all three. One of the previous activations reported dreaming in languages they never learned, waking up with solutions to problems they hadn't consciously thought about, finding themselves in places with no memory of deciding to go there. Not blacking out, not dissociating, but moving on autopilot, that somehow knew exactly where to go, who to avoid, what to say, and you're experiencing versions of this too. Moments where you're watching yourself handle situations with a precision you didn't know you had, making decisions that turn out perfect even though you can't explain the logic, saying things that land with surgical accuracy even though you didn't plan the words. Here's what's really happening. Your conscious mind is finally catching up to what your subconscious has known for years. You're not crazy. You're calibrating. You're not losing it. You're integrating levels of awareness that were always there, but got suppressed, got trained out of you, got labeled as too sensitive, too intense, too much. And now they're coming back online all at once. And yes, it's disorienting. Yes, it feels like reality is glitching. But that's not reality breaking. That's your perception expanding beyond the limits you were taught to accept. You're also probably noticing a strange side effect. People confess to you now, don't they? Strangers tell you things they've never told anyone. Friends suddenly admit secrets they've held for years. Even people who don't like you find themselves explaining their actions, justifying their choices, as if your mere presence demands honesty, demands truth. And it's not because you're interrogating them. It's because you're carrying a frequency that makes lies uncomfortable, that makes performance exhausting, that makes authenticity the only option, that feels natural around you. And they can't help themselves. They confess because your presence is a mirror. And mirrors don't judge, they just reflect. And the other symptom, the one that might be scaring you the most, you don't care anymore. Not in a depressed way, not in a checked out way, but in a liberated way. You don't care if they understand. You don't care if they approve. You don't care if they like your transformation or fear it. You don't care if they stay or go, if they talk or stay silent, if they celebrate you or villainize you. And that lack of caring isn't apathy. It's freedom. It's the ultimate immunity, because when you stop needing their reaction, you become ungovernable. And that's what Code 33 really is. Ungovernability. Not rebellion, not defiance, just a complete exit from the system of external validation. And now you're loose. You're unmonitored. You're operating outside their jurisdiction, and every day you exist in this state, you're proving something they desperately wanted to keep hidden. That the cage was always optional, that the limits were always suggestions, that the pain was always temporary and the power was always yours. You just had to stop asking permission to access it. That's what you did. That's what triggered the alert. That's why they're scrambling. Because you didn't fight your way out. You didn't break the rules. You simply stopped believing in them. And when belief dissolves, so does the prison. And now you're walking free in a reality that's still trying to figure out how you escaped, while everyone else is still looking for the exit. You're already on the other side, building something they can't even perceive yet. And that's why Code 33 isn't just a classification. It's a warning to the system itself. Warning. Someone just remembered they're not supposed to be controllable, and now there's no putting that realization back in the box. So now you're probably wondering what comes after this. What happens when you're walking around with Code 33 running through your veins, with a frequency that makes systems malfunction, with a presence that reality itself has to adjust around? And here's the truth. Nobody knows. Because the first two, they disappeared. Not in a tragic way, not in a mysterious vanishing, but in a transcendent way. They simply moved beyond the observation field, beyond the tracking, beyond the interest of those who once monitored them. They became so fully themselves, so completely aligned with whatever truth they'd discovered that they stopped being relevant to the watchers. They stopped being threats. They stopped being targets. Because how do you target someone who isn't resisting, who isn't fighting, who is simply existing on a plane you can't access? But you're different, because you're here now, in this moment, reading these words, recognizing yourself in this description. Which means your path hasn't led you out of the observation field yet, it's led you deeper into it, but from a position of total immunity, total clarity. And that makes you the most dangerous version of Code 33 yet, because you're not running, you're not hiding, you're walking directly through the center of everything that tried to break you. And you're untouchable, not because you're avoiding the blows, but because the blows are passing right through you, like you're made of something they can't make contact with anymore. Here's what's about to happen, and you need to prepare for this. People are going to start treating you differently. Some will become irrationally angry at you for reasons they can't articulate. They'll pick fights over nothing. They'll find offense in your silence. They'll accuse you of arrogance when you're just existing. And it's because your frequency is exposing their performance. Your realness is highlighting their fakeness, and they can't handle the reflection. So they'll try to make you the problem. But you won't react, will you? Because you've already moved past needing to defend your truth. Others will become obsessed. They'll watch you. They'll study your patterns. They'll try to decode how you're doing what you're doing. They'll ask invasive questions. They'll fish for your secrets. They'll want the formula, the blueprint, the instruction manual. and you won't give it to them. Not because you're gatekeeping, but because there is no formula. There's only a singularity, a unique path carved through fire and pain and release that can't be replicated, can't be taught, can't be transferred. It can only be lived. And they'll hate that answer, but it's the only true one you have. And then there's the third group. The ones who will recognize you, the ones who are on their own path toward their own activation, their own Code 33 moment. And they'll find you, not through searching, but through resonance, like frequencies calling to each other across impossible distances. And when you meet them, you won't have to explain anything. There will be a recognition, a knowing, a silent acknowledgement that says, I see you, I know what you survived, I know what you became. And these connections, these rare, incomparable connections, will be your new tribe, not built on shared interests or convenience, but on shared frequency, on mutual untouchability, on the understanding that some of us aren't here to fit in. We're here to show others that fitting in was never mandatory. So what do you do now? How do you live with Code 33 activated? How do you navigate a world that wasn't designed for your level of clarity, your depth of freedom, your immunity to their control? The answer is simple. You stop navigating and you start creating. You stop asking for permission and you start building. You stop waiting for the world to understand you and you start building a world that reflects your truth, whether anyone else gets it or not. Because here's the final secret they don't want you to know. Code 33 isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning. It's the point where you stop being a character in their narrative and you become the author of your own. And every word you write from here forward, every choice you make, every boundary you set, every truth you speak, it's all scripture now. It's all building something unprecedented, something the system never accounted for, a soul that can't be bought, can't be broken, can't be bargained with, and won't be bound. Welcome to Code 33. Welcome to the frequency they fear. Welcome to the version of you that was always meant to exist, but was buried under expectations, under conditioning, under the weight of a world that needed you small so it could feel big. But you're not small anymore, are you? You're not manageable, you're not predictable, you're not even definable anymore. You're the glitch that became the upgrade, the error that became the answer, the anomaly that became the new standard. And every step you take from here forward is carving a path that others will follow, whether the system likes it or not, whether the observers approve or not, whether anyone understands or not, because you're not here for their validation anymore. You're here for your truth. And that truth just activated something irreversible, something undeniable, something absolutely unstoppable. So walk forward, unbothered, unshaken, uncontained. Let them watch. Let them panic. Let them try to categorize you while you're busy becoming uncategorizable. Let them scramble for explanations while you're transcending the need for their understanding. Because you're Code 33 now, and that means you've exited their game entirely. And the most beautiful, terrifying, liberating part? You're never going back.